I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The house smelled faintly of jasmine and cinnamon, a scent Logan knew well, but one that now felt distant, almost foreign. The day he had waited months for, finally arriving back from his deployment, should have been filled with excitement, warmth, and the embrace of his wife, Maddie. Instead, it felt like stepping into a trap he hadn't seen coming. As Logan swung open the door, he immediately noticed the faint trace of an unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. The kind of scent that clung to the skin of someone who wasn't supposed to be there. His stomach tightened. He'd been in the military long enough to know when something wasn't right. "Maddie," he called, his voice steady, even though his mind raced with possibilities. No answer. His boots clicked across the hardwood floor as he moved through the house, the silence growing heavier with each step. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and Logan hesitated. His hand gripped the knob, but he didn't turn it. Instead, he leaned closer, hearing muffled voices from within. Maddie's laughter, light and carefree, echoed through the crack. And then another voice, one that wasn't his own. "He's never coming back early," the voice said, male and smug. Logan's heart stopped. His breath caught in his throat, but his hands didn't tremble. He wasn't sure if he was in shock, or if it was the military in him, the years of training that kept him in control. But in that moment, he had a choice. Act on impulse, confront them now, or wait. With a controlled breath, Logan stepped back from the door. He wasn't the type to act recklessly. No, he would wait. Let them think he didn't know. He'd make them regret underestimating him. This wouldn't be the last time Maddie made that mistake. Maddie sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone. She knew Logan was home. She had heard the front door, but there was no rush to greet him. No, running into his arms like in the old days. No, those days were gone. She had convinced herself this was the new normal. Logan had always been distant, buried in his work, in his deployment. She had needs too, after all, needs that weren't being met. It started innocently enough, a flirtation here and there, a late-night text, a lingering glance for Brandon, the gym owner down the street. But somewhere along the way, it turned into something more, something she couldn't get out of. Maddie had once loved Logan. There had been a time when she'd looked at him and saw her entire future. But the months and years of him being away wore her down. She wasn't a cold person, at least she didn't think she was. But she had needs, and Brandon had filled those needs. He was present. He was there. He had the kind of attention that Logan never seemed to have time for. She closed her eyes for a moment, leaning her head back against the chair. The guilt gnawed at her, but only in the quiet moments when she wasn't with him. When she was with Logan, the weight of her choices faded, replaced by the comfortable numbness she had built over the years. Logan's boots echoed through the hallway. He was home. He was waiting. And in that moment, Maddie felt a pang of something, a flicker of fear, maybe regret. But she shut it down quickly. It was too late for second thoughts now. When she turned around, Logan stood in the doorway, staring at her, his expression unreadable. His presence was as steady as it always had been, but there was something different in his eyes today, something sharper. "Maddie," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced a smile. "About what, Logan?" He stepped closer. "About everything." Brandon knew exactly what he was doing. He had seen Logan's type before, stoic, controlled, the type of man who thought he could keep his emotions buried under layers of duty and discipline. It wasn't that Logan was a bad guy. It was that Brandon knew something he didn't. Maddie wasn't happy. And if she wasn't happy with Logan, she was fair game. Brandon had never been the type to shy away from competition. He thrived on it, fed off the power he had over others, especially men like Logan, men who thought their strength came from being silent, being patient. But Brandon wasn't silent. He spoke. He dominated. He took what he wanted. And Maddie had wanted him. It had started innocently enough. A few casual texts, a touch here and there at the gym. But soon, he was showing up at her house when Logan wasn't around. He was making her laugh in ways Logan hadn't in months. He was doing the things that Logan had either forgotten or no longer cared to do. The worst part? Brandon didn't even feel guilty. Not for Maddie's betrayal of Logan, and certainly not for the chaos he knew was coming. He had watched Logan's arrival from a distance, Watched the way he walked into his home like a man who had just returned from battle, but not the kind of battle Brandon was fighting. The one from Maddie's heart. I don't think he'll ever understand, Brandon had told Maddie once, lying next to her in the dim light. He's too busy for you. He's always going to be too busy. Maddie didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. He's my husband. Brandon chuckled darkly, running his fingers down her arm. Not anymore, sweetheart. Not after he finds out what you've been up to. Hey, if you're still watching, that means you're enjoying the story. I have one small request. I'm trying to reach my first 1,000 subscribers. If you like stories like this, please hit the like button and subscribe to join the journey. It means a lot to me. And trust me, even better stories are coming. Logan knew exactly what Brandon was doing. The gym owner had a way of speaking, a way of moving that screamed arrogance. And it wasn't just his physical presence that grated on Logan's nerves. It was the blatant challenge Brandon posed. Logan wasn't a man given to overt displays of emotion, but the smugness Brandon exuded got under his skin in a way nothing else ever had. Brandon had started showing up at Logan's favorite spots: the local bar, the coffee shop, even the gym where Logan used to work out before his deployment. It was as if Brandon wanted to mark his territory, a silent taunt, daring Logan to confront him. This last time, Brandon wasn't subtle at all. He approached Logan at the bar, his usual cocky grin plastered across his face. He leaned in, as if sharing some great secret, lowering his voice just enough so only Logan could hear. I heard she's been missing you, Brandon said, glancing over at Maddie, who was sitting at the bar with her back to them. But not like she used to. Funny, isn't it? Logan felt his jaw tighten, but he didn't react. He simply took a sip from his beer, his gaze never leaving Brandon's. You think you can just walk back into her life like nothing happened? Brandon continued, not noticing the coldness in Logan's eyes. You're too late. She's mine now. Logan's calm facade didn't crack. We'll see about that, he said quietly, his voice low enough that only Brandon could hear. Brandon laughed. You think you scare me, don't you? Logan didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew the game Brandon was playing. But Logan had never been one for confrontations in public. No, Logan's way was quieter, subtler. His revenge would come at the perfect moment, when Brandon would least expect it. The day started like any other, the sun rising over the town, the faint hum of the city slowly picking up speed. But Logan had already set his plan in motion. He knew Brandon's weaknesses, his overconfidence, his belief that he could get away with anything. Logan had no intention of letting him off easy. The opportunity came during the local charity gala, a black tie event that was the talk of the town. Maddie had begged Logan to attend, to play the part of the perfect husband in front of their friends and colleagues. But Logan had other plans. He wasn't there to smile and mingle. He was there to deliver a message. Maddie was wrapped in a gorgeous red gown, looking every bit the part of the successful woman she had become, while Logan was calm and collected in a well-tailored suit. The gala was in full swing, the air filled with laughter and chatter, the clinking of glasses echoing off the walls. But for Logan, the noise faded into the background. The plan was simple. He had arranged for Brandon's sexual exploits, the ones he had recorded in secret, to be played on the large projector screen at the front of the room. The video was expertly timed. As the host took the stage to announce the next round of fundraising, the screen flickered, and then Brandon's face filled the room. At first, there was a stunned silence. But as the footage continued, the realization hit. It wasn't just Maddie in the video. It was Brandon with other women, multiple women, his betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. Maddie's face turned pale, her eyes wide in horror. She looked toward Logan, but his expression didn't change. He was calm, poised, the epitome of control. Brandon tried to jump to his feet, his face twisted in anger, but he was quickly restrained by a few of the guests who had gathered in shock. The room filled with murmurs, disbelief, and laughter. Logan didn't move, just stood at the back of the room, his presence unnoticed by most, but in that moment he had all the power. Brandon was humiliated, and Logan hadn't even broken a sweat. The fallout from the gala was immediate and intense. Logan's actions had exposed more than just Brandon's affair. It had exposed the entire web of deceit that had been spun around Maddie and the life they had built together. The town was abuzz with rumors, and Brandon's reputation was in tatters. He had no one to blame but himself. But the humiliation wasn't over. Logan wasn't done. His plan was to strip away everything Brandon had built, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. Logan began his next move by hacking into Brandon's private email account. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just any piece of leverage he could use to bring Brandon down further. It didn't take long before Logan found it. A series of financial transactions, all involving large sums of money from his gym clients, money that had mysteriously disappeared. Logan sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. The pieces were falling into place. Brandon had been embezzling from his clients for months, funneling the money into offshore accounts to cover his tracks. Logan didn't hesitate. He forwarded the evidence to several local news outlets and law enforcement agencies. This would be the final blow. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about bringing Brandon to his knees. Logan had already lost his marriage, but he was determined to make sure that Brandon paid for his actions in the only way that truly mattered: the law. Logan didn't need to raise his voice to send a message. The military had taught him one thing above all else: patience. Over the years, he had learned that the most devastating attacks weren't always the loudest. The slow, steady build of pressure, like a tightening noose, was far more effective than an explosive confrontation. As he sat in his small home office, Logan reviewed every detail of his plan. He was playing a long game now, one that required precision and finesse. It wasn't just about bringing down Brandon. It was about exposing him, making sure that everyone knew exactly what kind of man he was. Logan's military training had made him an expert in surveillance. He'd learned how to track people, gather intelligence, and make calculated moves without ever being detected. Now he was putting those skills to use against Brandon. Logan had already secured a hidden camera in the gym's office, capturing hours of footage. The next step was to make sure the authorities had everything they needed to tie Brandon's financial crimes to his personal actions. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Riley, the nurse who had become a quiet confidant over the past few weeks. She wasn't a love interest, at least not yet, but there was something about the way she spoke to him, the way she challenged him without judgment, that made her different from the others. "You're still planning?" she asked, stepping into the room. Her voice was calm, but there was a spark of concern in her eyes. "Always," Logan replied, without looking up. "You know what I'm doing. I'm making sure everything falls into place." Riley leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Just don't forget to live in the moment, Logan. You've been at this for a while, and I can see it's eating away at you." Logan paused for a moment, considering her words. Then, without turning around, he muttered, "I'll live after the job's done." Logan wasn't sure what hurt more: the betrayal of his wife, or the realization that his entire life had been built on a foundation of lies. When Maddie had asked him to come home early from deployment, he had been overjoyed. He had imagined a reunion full of warmth, love, and comfort. Instead, he had walked into a nightmare. The moment he had seen Maddie's face during the gala, he had known something was off. There was a look of disbelief, fear, and maybe even guilt in her eyes. But he had remained calm. He had been trained to stay composed under pressure, and that's exactly what he did. He had made his move, exposing Brandon and shattering the illusion Maddie had built for herself. Now, Maddie was at home, sitting in silence, waiting for Logan to come back. But Logan wasn't interested in talking, not yet. He needed to process everything. The devastation of what he had lost, his marriage, his trust, his dignity, was heavy. But the overwhelming feeling wasn't sorrow. It was anger. He had always tried to be the perfect husband, the loyal partner. He had sacrificed years of his life for his country, and when he had come home, he had expected the same loyalty from Maddie. Instead, he had found nothing but betrayal. Logan wasn't the type to show weakness, but he allowed himself a few moments alone in his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Then, he straightened up, wiped his face, and walked back inside. He wasn't going to let her off easy. "Logan," Maddie's voice was soft as he walked through the door. "We need to talk." Logan turned to face her, his expression stone cold. No, Madi, you need to listen. Logan's mind raced as he prepared for the next move. He had already seen the cracks in Maddie's resolve. She wasn't the strong, confident woman she once was. She was a shell of herself, broken by the weight of her own guilt and the pressure of her actions being exposed. But Logan wasn't going to let her off easy. His next move would push her to the edge, force her to confront the full scope of what she had done. And then he would have his answer. He didn't need to talk to Maddie right now. She knew exactly what was coming. It wasn't about the words anymore. It was about the aftermath. And the aftermath would be brutal. The morning after the gala, Logan went to his favorite diner for breakfast. He sat in the corner booth, sipping his coffee, watching as people filtered in and out. As usual, he was invisible, a man sitting quietly in the background. But today he was something else. Today, he was a man on a mission. The door opened, and in walked Brandon, looking disheveled and defeated. He glanced around nervously, as if he were looking for someone, anyone, to give him some reassurance. But there was no one. Logan's eyes narrowed. Brandon spotted him, and for a moment, their gazes locked. Brandon knew, and Logan could see the fear in his eyes. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. "Logan," Brandon said, walking up to his table. His voice was shaky, a mix of anger and desperation. "You don't have to do this. You think you're the only one who's been wronged here." Logan's lips curled into a cold smile. "You think this is about you? You're not even the main problem here, Brandon. This is about something much bigger." He leaned back in his seat, studying Brandon carefully. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to fall, and I'm going to make sure it happens slowly." With that, Logan stood up and walked out of the diner, leaving Brandon standing there, stunned and alone. Now, here's a special question for you, the audience. You've seen everything unfold. Logan's patience, Maddie's guilt, and Brandon's arrogance. Now, we want to know, where are you watching from? Which city or town? Tell us in the comments below. Let's see who's following this story from where. From the big cities to the quiet towns. We want to know where the drama is reaching you. Don't be shy. Let us know. The following day, Logan stood in front of his old military contacts, carefully planning his next move. He had everything he needed now: proof, evidence, and a target who was ripe for destruction. It wasn't just about getting back at Brandon anymore. It was about something bigger, about setting the stage for everything to come crashing down. Logan had been trained to stay ahead of his enemies, to think multiple steps ahead. It was the key to his success in combat, and now it would be the key to winning this battle. But Logan knew one thing for certain. This was not going to be fast or easy. It was going to be precise. Sitting across from one of his trusted contacts in the military, a man named Marcus, Logan laid out the plan. "I need access to the bank accounts linked to Brandon's gym," he said, his voice steady. "And I need it yesterday." Marcus nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You're playing a dangerous game, Logan. If we get caught..." Logan interrupted him with a firm stare. "We won't get caught. I'll handle it." "All right," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. "Everything's in there. Just remember, the harder you push, the harder they'll come for you." Logan smiled darkly. "Let them come. I've been waiting for this." With that, Marcus left, and Logan went to work. It wasn't just about ruining Brandon anymore. It was about digging into the very foundation of his life, his business, and his finances. Logan had learned how to dismantle his enemies, piece by piece, and he would do it with the precision only a military mind could deliver. The news hit Brandon like a freight train. Logan had struck again, this time not in public, but quietly, where it hurt most: his wallet. The evidence Logan had sent to the authorities, the tax investigators, and local businesses had all pointed directly to Brandon's financial fraud. Brandon had no idea how Logan had gotten access to his bank accounts, but the reality was inescapable. He was being investigated for embezzling money from his clients, misappropriating funds from his gym, and even money laundering. The weight of it all was too much. Brandon, the once confident, cocky man who had charmed everyone around him, was now a criminal in the eyes of the law. But even as the investigation unfolded, Brandon refused to admit defeat. He'd always believed that he could talk his way out of anything. He believed that people respected him, feared him, and would give him what he wanted. That was his first mistake. As Brandon tried to clean up his mess, Logan was already several steps ahead. He continued to send damning information to the authorities, making sure that the web of lies Brandon had woven was exposed for everyone to see. The more Brandon tried to play the victim, the more Logan ensured that the truth came to light. It was a game of chess, and Logan was playing it to perfection. "Logan," Riley said, meeting him for coffee one afternoon. "Isn't it enough?" "He's going down." Logan took a sip of his coffee, his eyes cold. "It's never enough. Not until he understands what he's done." She looked at him, concern lining her face. "Do you really think this will fix things with Maddie?" Logan's gaze hardened. "No, it's not about Maddie anymore. It's about making sure this man understands the consequences of his actions." Maddie couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her chest. The walls of their home felt more suffocating than ever, and she had no idea how to fix it. Logan had become a stranger to her, distant and cold, and every attempt to bridge the gap felt like trying to hold on to something slipping through her fingers. Logan had changed. There was no denying it. The man who had returned from his deployment was not the man she had married. His eyes, once filled with warmth, now only reflected a quiet anger that she couldn't understand. As the investigation into Brandon continued to unfold, Maddie found herself caught between two worlds. She was still clinging to the man she had once loved, but she knew the truth. She had betrayed him, and no amount of apologies or excuses could erase that. And yet, as the days wore on, she realized that the one person who had always been her rock was now the one she feared the most. Logan never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The silence between them spoke volumes, and the tension was unbearable. Maddie could feel the walls closing in on her, the pressure of her guilt weighing heavier by the minute. One night, Logan came home late, just as he had so many nights before. He was exhausted, not from the job, but from the war he was waging on the life they once shared. She watched him as he entered the room, his movements deliberate, his expression unreadable. "You're not saying much these days," Maddie said, her voice a mix of frustration and fear. "Logan, please, just talk to me." Logan didn't respond right away. He simply stared at her, his jaw clenched, and then walked past her without saying a word. The silence that followed felt like a physical blow, and Maddie realized something deep within her. Logan wasn't coming back. The man she had known was gone, replaced by someone more dangerous, more focused on revenge than anything else. And as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she wondered if she had truly lost him forever. Logan had always been a man of patterns. The military had taught him to look for them, to understand the rhythm of his enemy's movements, to anticipate their next steps. But the thing about patterns was that they could be broken. The key was knowing when to strike and when to wait. The more Logan watched Maddie, the more he saw the cracks in her carefully constructed mask. She no longer hid her guilt as well as she had before. The constant look of worry, the way her eyes darted away whenever he came into the room, it was as if she was always bracing for the inevitable confrontation, even though she had no idea when it would come. Logan knew exactly what she was thinking. Will he forgive me? Will I ever have a chance to make this right? But Logan had learned the hard way that forgiveness wasn't always an option. Not after what she'd done. Not after how deep the betrayal ran. His mind turned to Brandon. Brandon wasn't just a lover. He was a walking pattern of deceit, manipulation, and pride. He'd taken everything Logan had built and shredded it. He thought he could get away with it, that Logan would be too weak to fight back. But Logan had proven him wrong. The slow, deliberate push was working. The investigation was going full throttle. Now, it was just a matter of time before everything came crashing down on Brandon's head. Logan knew that Maddie was part of that pattern. She had always been part of it. She was too wrapped up in her own guilt to see what was coming for her next. The call came in late at night. Brandon's voice, ragged and desperate, cracked through Logan's phone as he answered. "I know it was you," Brandon spat. "I know you're the one behind this." Logan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the desk. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, his voice calm, controlled. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Brandon continued, his voice rising. "Sending all that evidence to the cops, to the news. You're trying to ruin me. You think I'll just roll over and take it?" Logan smiled to himself. The game was changing. Brandon was unraveling. Logan hadn't even had to confront him directly. Brandon was already self-destructing. "You've been playing this game all wrong, Brandon," Logan said, leaning forward, his voice turning ice cold. "You think I'm doing this for revenge? That's where you're wrong. I'm doing this because you think you're untouchable. But we both know the truth now." Brandon growled, unable to respond. Logan hung up without another word. The setup was complete. The authorities were closing in, and Brandon was on the verge of losing everything he had built. Logan knew that the final piece was about to fall into place. The public exposure was coming next, and when it did, Brandon's entire world would be turned upside down. Maddie had spent the last few days in a fog, torn between guilt and disbelief. The weight of Logan's actions was becoming impossible to ignore. She knew that what Logan was doing wasn't just about taking down Brandon. It was about taking down everything that had ever mattered to her. Every part of her life was crumbling, piece by piece, and all she could do was watch as it happened. She was sitting at the kitchen table when Logan walked in. She could tell by the look in his eyes that something had changed. He wasn't angry. He wasn't upset. He was calm. Too calm. "Logan," Maddie began, her voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" Logan didn't answer. He just walked past her, heading straight for the living room. He didn't sit. He didn't turn to face her. He just stood there, looking out the window. Maddie stood up, walking towards him. "Logan, please. I know what I did was wrong. But you have to understand, I was lost. I thought I was doing the right thing." Logan turned slowly to face her, his eyes sharp and unyielding. "No, Maddie," he said quietly. "You weren't lost. You made a choice. You made a choice to hurt me. And now, you have to live with the consequences." He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The calmness in his tone was more dangerous than any rage he could have displayed. "You think you can fix this, don't you?" Logan continued. "That somehow, if you say the right words, everything will go back to normal. But it won't. It can't. You've already broken it beyond repair." Maddie's throat tightened. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I never wanted to lose you." Logan shook his head. "You didn't lose me, Maddie. I lost you a long time ago. The moment you chose Brandon over everything we built. I didn't lose you. You lost me." The silence between them was suffocating. Maddie's eyes welled up with tears, but Logan didn't flinch. He didn't move. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Logan spoke again, his voice low and final. "I can't save you. Not anymore." And with that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving Maddie alone with the reality of what she had done and the consequences of it all. The weight of the investigation was beginning to crush Brandon. His gym was nearly bankrupt, and his reputation in the town was in ruins. He had tried to talk his way out of the mess, but with every move he made, the net around him tightened. Logan had sent everything to the authorities, and now Brandon couldn't escape the truth. He thought he could outsmart Logan, but he had underestimated him at every turn. Logan didn't just play by the rules. He knew how to manipulate the system. Every piece of evidence he had carefully placed was now being used against Brandon, piece by piece. One morning, as Brandon sat in his car, staring at the empty parking lot of his gym, his phone buzzed. He picked it up, seeing an unknown number flash across the screen. His heart sank. He'd been expecting this call. "This is Officer Miller," the voice on the other end said. "We need you to come in for questioning regarding multiple charges of financial fraud and embezzlement." Brandon's hand shook as he ended the call. He leaned back in his seat, feeling the full weight of his actions. He had built his empire on lies, but now it was all coming crashing down. He thought he could control everything, but Logan had proven him wrong at every turn. Brandon's next move was simple. He tried to escape. But no one escaped Logan. Not when Logan had already planned his fall. Brandon wasn't just going down for the crimes he had committed. He was going down for everything he had done to destroy Logan's life. As Logan watched the news footage of Brandon being arrested, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. This was the moment he had been working toward. But as the handcuffs clicked into place, Logan's mind wasn't on Brandon's downfall. It was on Maddie. The last few weeks had been torturous. Logan had kept his distance, retreating into his work, his mission, and his plan. He hadn't said much to Maddie. There was no reason to. What was there left to say? Maddie, on the other hand, had been spiraling. She hadn't left the house in days. Her once immaculate appearance now faded. Guilt was eating away at her. She was losing herself, her identity, her sense of worth. The man she had once betrayed had become a ghost to her, someone who was both out of reach and unreachable. The harder she tried to fix things, the more she realized that the damage was permanent. Logan stood in the doorway, watching her as she sat on the couch, staring at the floor. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes. He could see the remorse too, but none of that mattered anymore. "Maddie," Logan said softly, his voice cold and distant. "You're not going to fix this. You're not going to make it go away by trying to apologize or trying to find a way back to what we had. It's too late." Maddie's head shot up, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Logan, please. I don't know how to fix it. I just want you to see that I'm sorry." Logan stepped forward, his expression hard. "Sorry doesn't change anything. You betrayed me. You betrayed us. And now you have to deal with that. I don't owe you anything." Maddie's face fell, the tears she had been holding back finally spilling over. She had no words to say. Logan had already said it all. There was no going back, no hope for reconciliation. As the days passed, the air in the house grew heavier. Maddie tried to reach out to Logan again, but he remained distant, cold. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he didn't feel the same anymore. He had already given her everything, and she had taken it all for granted. The house, once a place of shared memories, now felt like a battlefield. Maddie couldn't escape the feeling of emptiness that settled in her chest, knowing that the man she had once loved had turned into someone she barely recognized. She tried to apologize again, one night after dinner. She had prepared his favorite meal, hoping that it would bring some sense of normalcy back to their relationship. "Logan," she began, voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. I've made mistakes. Huge mistakes. But I'm trying. Please, just give me a chance to prove that I could be the woman you need." Logan looked at her, his gaze unyielding. "You've already had your chance, Maddie, and you threw it away. I don't have time for this. I'm done." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. He was done. That was it. She had pushed him too far, and now there was no coming back. She had lost him completely. As Logan turned to walk away, Maddie collapsed onto the couch, feeling the weight of everything she had done. It was over. There was nothing left for her to fix. The collapse of Brandon's world had been swift. One moment, he was the proud owner of a thriving gym. The next, he was a disgraced criminal, standing in front of the courthouse, awaiting his fate. His reputation had been shattered. His clients, his friends, even his most loyal employees had turned their backs on him. The scandal that Logan had set in motion had reached its final chapter, and Brandon was left holding nothing but the broken pieces of his own hubris. Logan didn't attend the trial. He didn't need to. He had already won. Everything he had exposed, Brandon's fraud, his affairs, his manipulation, had been meticulously laid out in front of the jury. There was no defense, no way out. Brandon's life was over. But as Logan watched the news from the comfort of his home, a part of him felt no satisfaction. He had brought Brandon down, but there was no joy in it. He had never wanted this to be his life, to destroy a man so completely. But the truth was, Brandon had asked for it. Every move Logan had made was a response to Brandon's arrogance, his disregard for everything Logan held dear. Maddie was still in the house, still trying to piece together some semblance of what they had. But Logan had already accepted that it was over. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Her betrayal had been the catalyst for all of this, and there was no coming back from it. Logan wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't hurt. He was just done. Days passed, weeks even. Logan had kept himself busy, throwing himself into his work, into the gym he had started to rebuild. But when he wasn't working, when he was left alone with his thoughts, the void grew. It wasn't just the loss of Maddie. It wasn't just the broken trust or the shattered marriage. It was the realization that none of it mattered in the way he had once thought it did. The world had continued to turn, with or without him, and no amount of revenge, no amount of justice, could fill the emptiness that had settled in his chest. Maddie still lingered around the house, though her presence was barely felt. She would try to engage in conversation, but each time she did, Logan felt the weight of her words like a burden. There was nothing left to say, The space between them had grown into a chasm, one too wide to cross. He had given her everything, and she had betrayed him. There was no room left for forgiveness. The love they had shared had dissolved into something unrecognizable. One evening, as Logan sat in his office, his fingers running over the edge of his desk, he realized he had already made his decision. There was no going back. The life he had once envisioned for himself with Maddie no longer existed. He had to leave. He had to move on. The house, the town, everything that reminded him of her, it all had to go. The only thing he needed now was peace. Logan packed his things with an efficiency that surprised him. He didn't look back at the house, at the memories that filled its walls. He didn't let himself feel the weight of what he was leaving behind. This was his choice, his decision. Maddie had begged him to stay. She had pleaded with him, telling him how sorry she was, how she had made a mistake. But Logan had already made up his mind. There was nothing left for him in this life with her. "You don't get it, do you?" Logan had said when Maddie tried one last time to pull him back. "You can apologize all you want, but that doesn't change what you did. It doesn't change what's been lost. I'm not the man I was when I walked in here that day. You kill that man." Maddie's eyes welled with tears, but Logan wasn't swayed. He had reached the point where he no longer needed her approval, no longer needed her validation. His path was his own now, and the only thing left to do was move forward. Logan left the house and walked into the night, his footsteps echoing in the quiet street. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay here. The life he had lived with Maddie was over. The revenge he had sought was complete. And now, all that was left was for him to find a way to rebuild his own life. One that didn't involve her, one that didn't involve Brandon. He had let go. And with that, for the first time in months, Logan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The town was quieter without Logan in it. The weight of his absence was undeniable. Maddie was left behind, trying to piece together the fragments of a life that had shattered beyond repair. She had tried to reach out to him, calls, texts, even a letter, but Logan remained steadfast in his decision. The gym he had once poured his soul into had become a symbol of something darker, a place that reminded him of the man he used to be, before betrayal, before the fall of his marriage. But it was also the place he had always found solace in, a space that had allowed him to heal in the past. With his decision to leave the past behind, Logan found himself looking for something new. He started traveling, visiting other cities, meeting new people. Each place was a fresh start, a reminder that the world didn't stop when one chapter closed. But it wasn't just about escaping the past. It was about finding something he had lost, his sense of purpose. Logan realized he was no longer fighting for anyone else. He was fighting for himself. He moved to a new city, settled into a modest apartment, and began rebuilding his life from the ground up. He enrolled in a new gym, not as an owner, but as a member. He trained hard, pushed himself further than he had before, but there was something different this time. It wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about healing. For the first time in months, Logan felt peace. He wasn't running from anything. He wasn't chasing revenge. He was simply living. Maddie's life, on the other hand, continued to spiral. With the finalization of Brandon's conviction, she had lost everything: her job, her friends, and most painfully, Logan. The man she had once adored was now a stranger to her, someone she would never be able to win back. She spent her days in solitude, replaying everything in her mind, wondering if there was something she could have done differently. But the truth was, she knew deep down that it was over. Logan was never coming back. She had crossed a line, and he couldn't forgive her for it. Maddie had tried to fill the void with work and distractions, but nothing could replace the loss of Logan. She had torn apart the most important relationship of her life, and now there was no way to fix it. The reality was sinking in. One evening, as she sat in her empty apartment, Maddie received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, Logan's. She stared at it for a long time, unsure if she should open it. But finally she did. Inside, there was only a short note. "I've moved on, Maddie. You need to too. Let go." She clutched the letter to her chest, tears filling her eyes. It wasn't the closure she had hoped for, but it was all she was ever going to get. And in that moment, she realized that Logan had already healed. He had let go, and now it was her turn to do the same. Months passed, and Logan continued to rebuild his life one day at a time. He had found a sense of purpose in helping others, something he hadn't even known he needed. He started working with local veterans, offering free fitness classes to help them regain their strength, their confidence. It was a small step, but it meant everything. The gym became a sanctuary for him, a place where he could share his own journey with those who understood the pain of loss and betrayal. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about healing, not just for himself, but for others as well. One day, a man approached Logan after class. He looked older, worn down by life, but there was something in his eyes that reminded Logan of himself, someone who had lost everything, only to find a way back. "Thanks, man," the man said, clapping Logan on the back. "I haven't felt this good in years. You're helping me get back on track." Logan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. It wasn't much, but it was something. He had made a difference. And in that moment, he realized something important. This was his new purpose. This was what he had been fighting for all along. As the sun set on another long day of training, Logan stood outside the gym, looking at the city skyline. It wasn't the life he had envisioned with Maddie, but it was his life now. And for the first time in a long while, Logan felt at peace. Logan stood outside the gym as the early evening sun began to dip behind the skyline. The world around him felt different now, calmer, more grounded. But there were still moments when he was haunted by the memories of his life before. The life with Maddie, the life that had been ripped apart by lies and betrayal. But that was the past. He had made peace with it. The truth was, Logan had spent so many years being defined by his duty, by his sense of responsibility, and by his need to protect others. Now, for the first time in years, he was focusing on himself, on finding purpose in the things that mattered. He had started to build something for himself, something that didn't involve anyone else's mistakes or regrets. He had trained others, offered them his wisdom and support, but he had also learned something vital for himself along the way. He could rebuild, not just his career, but his identity, his sense of self-worth. As he stepped into the gym, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Logan pulled it out to see a message from one of his old military contacts. "They're looking for you. The case with Brandon is getting ugly. They think you were involved." Logan sighed. He had known this day would come. No matter how far he ran, no matter how hard he tried to leave it all behind, his past would always come knocking. But this time he was ready. The world could try to drag him back, but Logan was no longer that man, the man who was pushed around by circumstances. He had nothing to fear anymore. It was time to face the consequences, but with confidence, knowing that he had already won the fight that mattered most. Logan stood in the cold, sterile conference room, facing a group of investigators. There was no going around it anymore. They had pulled him in for questioning, suspecting his involvement in Brandon's criminal activities. They didn't have concrete evidence. Logan had been careful about that, but their suspicion was all over their faces. "You know why you're here," the lead investigator said, leaning across the table. "We've got a lot of circumstantial evidence that suggests you've been involved with Brandon's operations. We know about your connection with him, and we know you've been running things behind the scenes." Logan remained still, his expression calm. He had expected this. It wasn't the first time he'd faced interrogation, and it wouldn't be the last. "I don't know what you're talking about," Logan said, his voice steady but cold. "I've been focused on my own life. I moved on. I'm not involved in any of this." The investigator pushed harder. "Come on, Logan. You've been gone for a long time. We know what happened between you and Brandon. We've got a trail that leads straight to you. You want to tell us your side? Or should we start charging you?" Logan leaned back in his chair. His eyes narrowed as he glanced at each investigator in the room. He could feel the pressure mounting, but it didn't faze him. In the silence, he let the tension build. "I don't need to tell you anything," Logan said with finality. "I'm done with that part of my life. You want to investigate? Fine, but you're wasting your time. I've got nothing to hide." For a long moment, the room was silent. Logan could see that his words had struck a nerve. The investigators weren't used to being dismissed, but they knew better than to push any further. They had no case, no solid evidence. It was just a matter of time before they let him go. Finally, the lead investigator sighed and stood up. "Fine for now, but we'll be watching you. Logan didn't flinch. "You can watch all you want, but you won't find anything." As he left the building, Logan felt a rush of relief. It was over. They hadn't broken him. The investigation had been a nuisance, a reminder of a life he no longer wanted. But now, with the past finally behind him, he could truly start fresh. Logan returned to the gym later that evening, exhausted but satisfied. The weight of the interrogation had been heavy, but he had held his ground. He was untouchable now, not because of any outside force, but because he had found his inner strength, his own peace. As the door swung open, he was greeted by the familiar hum of the gym, a place that had become his sanctuary. His purpose had shifted, and in doing so, he had begun to forge a new life, one where he wasn't constantly fighting to survive. His focus had moved from revenge to healing, and through that healing, he had found a way to help others. Logan no longer needed to seek validation or approval from anyone. He had built something for himself from the ground up. One of his regular clients, a middle-aged man who had struggled with his own demons, approached him after a workout. "You've changed, Logan," the man said, his voice hoarse from exertion. "I don't know what it is, but you're different now. You're not just teaching us how to work out, you're teaching us how to live." Logan paused, looking at the man. For a moment, he thought of Maddie, of the past, of everything that had led him to this point. He could see it all clearly now. "I'm teaching you how to keep going," Logan said, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of everything he had been through. "Because that's all we can do. Keep going." As he watched the man leave, Logan felt a sense of pride. It wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about legacy, about the way he could change the lives of others by simply living his truth. Logan had fought through his darkest moments, and now he had something to offer that was far more valuable than revenge. He had peace. He had purpose. And, most importantly, he had a future that was his own to shape. Logan's days had become less about what he had lost and more about what he had gained. The gym was thriving, but it was more than just a business to him now. It was a community, a place where people came to rebuild themselves, just as he had. His past, once a constant shadow over his every step, had finally stopped dictating his future. But it wasn't just the gym that had brought him peace. Logan had found the ability to embrace his own solitude. For so long, he had lived for others, for his wife, for his duty, for his need for validation. But now, he was living for himself. The morning routine had become sacred. He woke up early, spent time training, and then focused on the business of the gym. It was a simple life, one he had built on his own terms. And yet, it felt like the most fulfilling one he had ever known. One afternoon, as Logan worked on a set of weights in the back room, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. It was Riley, the woman who had quietly been a steady presence in his life over the past months. She had been a friend, a confidant, but neither of them had pushed it beyond that. Their conversations had always been easy, casual, with no expectations. "Need some help?" Riley asked, a playful smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Logan nodded, wiping his hands on his towel. "Sure, just finishing up some numbers. But if you're here to distract me, that's fine too." Riley laughed, but there was something different in the air between them now. Logan couldn't quite place it, but it felt like a moment of something new, a shift, a subtle change. It wasn't about moving on from the past anymore. It was about finding the future that had been waiting for him all along. "I've been thinking," Riley said, her voice more serious now. "You've rebuilt yourself, Logan. I've watched you do it, and it's inspiring." Logan didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to hearing praise, but he could feel the sincerity in her words. She wasn't just talking about the gym. She was talking about the man he had become. "I'm just doing what I've learned to do," Logan replied, his voice quieter than usual. "One step at a time." Riley stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. "You know, you don't have to do it alone." Logan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't let anyone get close in a long time. He had built walls around himself, around the parts of him that still felt broken. But here was someone offering a chance to share something, to trust again. For the first time in a long while, Logan didn't feel the weight of his past. Maybe it was time to allow himself to feel something new, a glimmer of hope. It had been nearly a year since Logan had left the life he once knew. His days now were filled with purpose. He woke up with a clear sense of who he was, what he wanted, and how to make it happen. But there were still moments, fleeting though they were, when the ghosts of the past would show up. There were nights when he couldn't sleep, his thoughts swirling with memories of Maddie, of Brandon, and the betrayal that had broken him. He thought about it sometimes, the pain of the past, how it had shaped him. But what haunted him more than the betrayal was the fact that he had allowed it to control him for so long. Logan had given it power over his every decision, over his sense of self. He thought about Maddie again, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a sense of quiet finality. She had made her choices, and he had made his. The life they could have had was no longer possible, not for her and not for him. But the man who had loved her was gone, and in his place was a man who was free. Logan took a deep breath and walked to the gym. He was no longer chasing something. He wasn't running away from the past. He was simply moving forward, with no expectations and no regrets. As he entered the gym, he noticed one of the veterans who had been coming for months, a man who had struggled with his own demons, but had finally found some peace through Logan's guidance. "You've helped me get back on my feet," the man said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've been through a lot, but this place, this gym, has made all the difference." "You've made a difference, Logan." Logan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, not me. I just showed you the way." As he left the gym that evening, Logan felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He wasn't looking for validation anymore. He had already found it. And now, he could look ahead with clarity, knowing that he had turned the page on his own life. As the days continued to pass, Logan began to realize something important. He wasn't defined by his past, nor was he shaped by the mistakes of others. The things that had hurt him, the betrayals, the loss, they no longer had the power to hold him back. What mattered now was what he had built, not just in the gym, but in his heart. He had learned to trust again. He had learned to forgive, not just others, but himself. And in that forgiveness, Logan found freedom. He stood in the gym, watching as the last class of the day wrapped up. The people around him had become more than clients. They were his community. And Logan had become something more than a man seeking revenge. He had become a mentor, a guide, a person who had learned to turn his pain into something beautiful. He thought about the future, about the people he could continue to help, the lives he could change. Logan wasn't just leaving behind a gym. He was leaving behind a legacy, one of strength, resilience, and the courage to rebuild after everything had fallen apart. For the first time in his life, Logan felt complete. He wasn't running from anything anymore. He was running towards something, a future that was finally his own. And with that, Logan walked out of the gym, knowing that the journey was just beginning. Logan sat at his desk, staring at the map of the city pinned on the wall in front of him. It had been a while since he had looked at it this way, with the intent of building something new. The gym was thriving, but Logan had always known that he wasn't just meant to stay in one place forever. It had been nearly a year since he had left everything behind: his marriage, the betrayals, the emotional baggage that had kept him locked in a cycle of pain. The past no longer haunted him in the same way. It had been a harsh teacher, but one that had taught him how to build himself from the ground up. He'd learned that healing wasn't about waiting for closure. It was about taking the next step, even when the future felt uncertain. And right now, Logan felt more certain than ever. He had the chance to create something bigger, something lasting. He had received an email that morning. It was an invitation to speak at a veterans retreat in another city. A chance to share his story, to help others who had struggled with their own battles, both on the battlefield and in life. For the first time in a long while, Logan smiled. Maybe this was his next chapter. He didn't know what would come of it. He didn't know how far this new path would take him. But it didn't matter. He had already gone through the hardest part. Now, it was time to grow, to help others, and to finally find a peace that he hadn't realized he was searching for. Logan packed a small bag, ready for whatever came next. He wasn't running from anything anymore. He was walking towards something. And for the first time, it felt right. Logan's trip to the veterans retreat had been a turning point. The people he met there, the men and women who had served, who had fought their own battles, reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about connection, about being there for each other, sharing the weight of the world with people who understood. He had shared his story of the betrayal of his military service, of how he had turned pain into purpose, and the response had been overwhelming. There were others like him, others who had been broken and had found a way to rise again. It was a place of healing, a place where scars weren't hidden but embraced. As Logan sat by the campfire that night, a young man, one of the veterans, approached him. He had tears in his eyes. "You don't know how much what you said tonight means," the man said, his voice rough. "I've been holding on to so much guilt. I didn't think I could get past it, but now I see there's hope." Logan nodded, the weight of the man's words settling deep within him. It was moments like this that made it all worthwhile. He had moved beyond revenge and anger. Now, he was building something real. He was helping people heal, just as he had done. But in the midst of all this healing, there was a lingering thought that tugged at Logan. Maddie. He hadn't seen or heard from her in months. And part of him wondered if she had finally found her own path to healing, or if she was still stuck in the same cycle of regret. Logan knew he couldn't change the past. He had moved forward, and he had no intention of looking back. But that old wound, the one she had left, still lingered. He hadn't forgiven her, but that didn't mean he hadn't learned to live without the pain. The truth was, he didn't need closure from her. The peace he had found didn't come from her apology. It had come from within himself. Logan returned from the retreat a different man, not in the sense that he had changed, but that he had embraced the change he had made in his life. He was no longer the man who had been consumed by anger and betrayal. He had let go of the past, not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't have to define him. He walked into the gym, where his clients were finishing up their last set. He smiled to himself. This was his legacy now. Not the bitterness of what had happened, but the strength and resilience he helped others discover in themselves. As he wrapped up the session and began cleaning up, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Curious," Logan answered. "Logan," the voice on the other end said. It was Maddie. For a moment, Logan felt his heart stop. The familiar emotions rushed back, the hurt, the anger, the sorrow. But this time, they didn't consume him. They simply passed through him. "Maddie," Logan said, his voice calm. "I'm listening." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again. "I don't expect anything from you, Logan. I just needed to say, I'm sorry for everything. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I have to live with that. But I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to heal." Logan took a deep breath. It wasn't the grand reunion he had once imagined. It wasn't the closure he had hoped for. But it was something. It was real. "I'm glad you're trying," Logan said, his voice steady. "I hope you find what you're looking for. But we're both on different paths now. And that's okay." Maddie's voice cracked. "I understand. I really do. And I don't want anything from you, Logan. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry." Logan closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the words. "Goodbye, Maddie." The call ended, and Logan sat down on the bench, staring at the floor for a few moments. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was closure in its own quiet way. And with that, Logan stood up, walked out of the gym, and stepped into his new life. One where the past no longer held him captive. One where the future was his to shape. Logan stepped into the gym with a renewed sense of purpose. The past few months had taught him a lot about the man he was becoming, someone not defined by past hurts, but by the lessons learned through them. The gym had become his second home, a place where he could not only heal, but also help others heal. It was a living testament to how far he had come. That morning, a new client walked in, a man in his late 30s, looking as if life had already dealt him a hard hand. He had the same lost look Logan had once seen in the mirror. The man approached Logan, shaking his hand as they exchanged introductions. "I'm just looking for a way to move on," the man said, his voice quiet but desperate. "I've been through a lot, and I just need something to hold on to. I heard this gym is more than just a place to work out. Is that true?" Logan studied the man, seeing the same exhaustion in his eyes that he had felt all those months ago. A part of him wanted to turn away, to keep his distance. But the truth was, he had found strength in the people he had helped along the way. And here, in this man's eyes, was an opportunity to give something back. "Yeah, Logan said, his voice steady and calm. "It's more than just a gym. This is about finding yourself again. Whatever you've been through, you're not alone. We all have our battles." The man smiled, a small but grateful expression. It was a moment of connection, one that Logan had learned to value above all else. As the man walked to the mats, Logan stood there for a moment, watching him. It was in moments like this that Logan realized the true power of resilience. He wasn't just rebuilding himself anymore. He was part of something bigger. And for the first time in his life, Logan understood that this was where he was meant to be. Maddie's call had been the final step in closing that chapter of his life. Logan had no illusions. There was no magical reunion, no grand reconciliation. There was just a quiet acceptance of what had happened and what couldn't be undone. Logan had learned that true peace wasn't about making things right. It was about making peace with what was. As he walked through the gym that evening, the sounds of people training, the clanging of weights, the steady rhythm of hard work, Logan felt at ease. He wasn't living in the past anymore. The shadow of betrayal that had once consumed him had faded into the background, no longer controlling his every move. Logan had also learned something important about forgiveness. It didn't require the other person to ask for it. It was a choice. It was about letting go of the weight that had been holding him down. And with Maddie's call, he had finally let go. There was still a lot of work ahead, not just for the gym, but for himself. There would always be battles to fight, internal ones, emotional ones, professional ones. But Logan had learned how to fight in a new way. He had learned that the battles that truly mattered weren't against others. They were against himself. And as long as he continued to fight, to grow, and to rebuild, he would always find his way forward. Riley walked in just as he was finishing up his work. She had become a quiet but steady presence in his life. Their relationship had developed slowly, with no pressure, no expectations. She wasn't trying to fix him, and that, more than anything, had allowed Logan to open up in ways he never thought possible. "Ready to close up?" Riley asked with a smile. Logan nodded, offering a half-smile in return. "Yeah, let's call it a day." As they walked out of the gym together, Logan glanced up at the sky. It was clear, the stars shining brightly. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, Logan wasn't afraid of it. He had faced his demons, he had rebuilt his life, and now, the future was his to shape. The next few weeks flew by. Logan found himself more deeply involved in his work at the gym, offering mentorship to young men and women who were looking for a way to reclaim their lives, just as he had done. His clients saw him not just as a trainer, but as a living example of what resilience truly meant, and that, more than any achievement, was his greatest legacy. But there were days when he would look back, just for a moment, at the man he used to be, the man who had trusted too easily, who had been broken by betrayal. It was a hard part of his past to accept, but Logan had learned to look at it without shame. It had shaped him into who he was today. One evening, after a long day of training, Logan sat on the bench outside the gym, taking in the quiet of the night. He thought about everything, the pain, the anger, the healing. He thought about Maddie, about Brandon, about all the people who had hurt him. And for the first time, he realized that none of it mattered anymore. It was just part of the story that had led him here, to this moment. He had built something new, something that was bigger than revenge or regret. He had built a future, and that was all that mattered. As he looked up at the stars once more, Logan felt at peace. The journey had been long, but it had been worth it. He wasn't running anymore. He was exactly where he needed to be. Logan had become used to the rhythm of his life now. Steady, purposeful, filled with moments of reflection and growth. The gym was thriving, and he was slowly gaining a reputation not just as a trainer, but as someone who understood the deeper aspects of resilience and healing. But as his success grew, so did the pressure. It wasn't just about maintaining the business anymore. It was about continuing to evolve. Logan had built this from nothing, but he couldn't allow himself to stagnate. The temptation to grow complacent was always there, creeping in when he least expected it. He had seen it happen to others, people who got comfortable and forgot why they started in the first place. One afternoon, as he was cleaning up after a session, a young woman approached him. She had that familiar lost look in her eyes, the same one he'd once had. He had learned to recognize it. It was the look of someone carrying more weight than they should, someone who needed guidance. "Hey, Logan, can I talk to you?" the woman asked, her voice tentative. Logan wiped his hands on a towel and looked up. "Sure, what's going on?" She hesitated for a moment before speaking, her eyes focused on the floor. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this. I've been trying to push myself, but I keep hitting a wall. I keep failing, and I don't know if I'm strong enough." Logan took a step forward, his voice steady. "Let me tell you something. Strength isn't about never failing. It's about how you get up when you do. We all hit walls. What matters is how you keep going, even when it seems impossible." The woman nodded, absorbing his words. Logan could see the doubt in her eyes start to fade, replaced by a flicker of determination. That was the part of the job that mattered most. Helping others find their strength. That was the legacy he had built, the one he could always be proud of. It had been months since Logan had last thought about Maddie. The memories of their life together no longer haunted him. They were just that, memories. He had moved forward. He had let go of the anger, the betrayal, and most importantly, the need for closure. But life had a way of surprising him. One afternoon, as Logan was closing up the gym, the door opened, and in walked someone he didn't expect to see again. Maddie. Her presence was like a shadow falling over the gym. For a moment, Logan froze, unsure of what to say or do. She had changed. Her once confident demeanor was now tempered with a quiet vulnerability. The weight of time and regret seemed to press down on her, and she stood there, uncertain of whether or not she should approach him. "Logan," Maddie said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know where else to go. I just need to talk to you." Logan's heart skipped a beat, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had moved on from this. He had no space left in his life for more old ghosts. But as he looked at her, he couldn't deny that there was still a part of him that wondered what had brought her here. "You don't need to explain yourself," Logan said after a long pause. "I've moved on, Maddie. I've let go of everything." "I know," she replied, her voice heavy with the weight of her own admission. "I'm not here for that. I'm here because I need to tell you that I've changed. I've spent the last year trying to put the pieces together, trying to figure out who I am and how I can be better. And I realize now that it's too late for us. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know." Logan didn't know how to respond. There was no anger left in him, just a strange mixture of sadness and acceptance. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking again. "Then you've already made the biggest step, Maddie. The only thing I can tell you now is that you have to keep going. We all do." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Logan, for everything." With that, she turned and walked out of the gym, leaving Logan standing in the silence she left behind. It wasn't a grand ending, but it was enough. Logan didn't need closure anymore. He had given it to himself long ago. The next few weeks passed quickly, each day blending into the next as Logan continued to focus on his work and his new life. He had learned to build something meaningful, something that wasn't rooted in the past, but was instead anchored in the present. As the gym grew, so did his relationships with the people he trained. He had become more than just a trainer. He was a mentor, a guide, someone who had walked through the fire and come out stronger. His work was no longer about just getting people in shape. It was about showing them that they could push through their own personal battles, just like he had. One night, after a particularly tough training session, Riley walked over to Logan. They had talked before, shared moments of camaraderie, but tonight felt different. She had been a steady presence in his life, and Logan had come to realize that he no longer wanted to be alone. "You know, I'm proud of you," Riley said, standing next to him as they watched the last of the clients leave. "You've come a long way, from that broken guy who walked in here months ago to the man you are now. You've built something beautiful." Logan glanced at her, his eyes softening. "I couldn't have done it without the people around me, you included." Riley smiled. "Well, I'm glad I could be a part of it. But I think there's something else you need to do, Logan. Something that's been a long time coming." Logan looked at her, confused. "What do you mean? You've built this new life, this new future. But there's one thing left for you to do." Logan waited for her to continue. "You have to let yourself be happy, Logan. You've earned it." Let yourself take that next step. It was the push Logan needed. He had spent so much time trying to heal, trying to move forward. But now, he was ready to embrace it all. His past, his present, and the future that awaited him. Riley had been right. He had built this life from nothing. And now, it was time to let it all flourish. With that, Logan smiled. He was ready for whatever came next. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the gym as Logan locked up for the evening. He stood outside for a moment, looking out at the quiet street, feeling the cool breeze against his skin. The day had been long, full of sweat and effort, but it had felt different, lighter. Riley had been a constant presence in his life for months, and over time, their relationship had grown into something undeniable. It wasn't love in the grand, dramatic sense, but it was something deeper, more grounded. They understood each other in ways no one else could. Logan had stopped running from the idea of letting someone in, and Riley had quietly shown him that it was okay to need others. As Logan packed up his things, Riley walked over to him, her hands tucked in her jacket pockets, a slight grin on her face. "You look like you've got something on your mind," she said, stepping closer. Logan chuckled softly, feeling the weight of the last few months lift just a little more. "Ido, it's strange. I've been so caught up in rebuilding everything, trying to fix what was broken, but now I'm starting to see that maybe it's not about fixing things at all. It's about connecting with the people around me, with the work I'm doing, and most importantly, with myself." Riley tilted her head, her expression softening. "That's a big realization." "It is," Logan agreed, "but it's the right one." There was a pause, and for the first time in a long while, Logan felt comfortable simply standing in the moment, sharing it with someone else. He no longer felt the need to rush ahead, to fill the silence with questions or regrets. "You know, I'm glad you're here," Logan said quietly, his voice sincere. "You've been a constant for me. I don't think I could have done it alone." Riley smiled, stepping closer. "We've all got our battles, Logan, but it's better when we're not fighting alone." Logan nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. He wasn't alone anymore, and maybe, for the first time, he didn't need to be. It had been a few weeks since Maddie's visit to the gym. Logan had thought he was prepared for it, but when the door had opened and she stood there, vulnerable, asking for forgiveness, it had struck him harder than he expected. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, it all resurfaced in an instant. But now, looking back on it, he realized that it had been a turning point for both of them. Maddie had taken responsibility for her actions, and while Logan didn't expect to ever rebuild their relationship, the conversation had allowed him to finally let go. It wasn't just about forgiving her. It was about forgiving himself. The past no longer had a hold on him. He was standing in the same spot where he had stood a year ago, the day he had made the decision to leave his old life behind. The man who had walked out of that house was not the same man who stood here today. And that was something Logan had come to understand fully. The past didn't have to define him. His mistakes, his pain, his regrets, they were all part of the story, but they didn't dictate the ending. He walked through the gym, glancing at the faces of his clients as they trained, laughed, and pushed each other. This was his purpose now. Not revenge, not anger, but connection and healing. It was a full circle moment for Logan, one that reminded him how far he had come and how much farther he could still go. Later that night, as he sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, Riley joined him with 2 mugs of coffee. She sat across from him, her expression quiet but understanding. "I've been thinking," Logan began, looking at her with a thoughtful expression, "about what comes next. I've built this life for myself, but it's not just about the gym or the business anymore. It's about making sure the people I help know that they're not alone. I want to do more, create something bigger than myself." Riley raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Bigger than the gym?" "Yeah," Logan said with a smile. "I'm thinking about starting a foundation, a way to help more people, not just with fitness, but with everything. We've all got our struggles. I want to make sure no one has to fight them alone." Riley smiled warmly, a sense of pride in her eyes. "I think that's an amazing idea. You've already changed so many lives, Logan. Why stop now?" Logan nodded, feeling a surge of purpose flood through him. It wasn't just a gym he was building. It was a community, a network of people who understood each other, supported each other, and fought alongside each other. This wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about something much bigger. Logan's foundation began to take shape faster than he expected. With the support of Riley and his clients, he started organizing events, fundraisers, workshops, and fitness challenges that would help raise awareness and bring people together. The gym had grown, and it was no longer just a place to work out. It was a beacon for those who needed support, strength, and hope. One day, as Logan was finalizing the plans for the first big event, Riley stood by his side, her smile genuine. "You're really doing it, aren't you?" Logan looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "I don't want to just help people. I want to make sure they never feel like they have to face their demons alone. I want to create a place where they can find a second chance, just like I did." Riley nodded, her eyes sparkling with pride. "I think you're going to change a lot of lives, Logan." Logan smiled back, the weight of the last few years lifting from his shoulders. He had built this life from the ground up, and now it was time to build something even greater. The foundation wasn't just about helping people physically. It was about giving them the tools to rebuild their own lives, to rise above their struggles, and create a future they could be proud of. As the first event rolled around, Logan stood in front of a room full of people who had come to support the cause. He couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had come so far from the broken man he had once been, and now he was standing in front of something beautiful, a community that would continue to grow, support, and empower one another. "I'm proud of you all," Logan said, his voice strong and clear. "This is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long while, Logan looked ahead to the future, not with uncertainty, but with excitement. The path forward was his to shape, and he was ready. Logan stood at the podium, looking out over the crowd. The room was packed with people who had come to support the charity event for his foundation. His heart swelled with pride, not for the event itself, but for the people who were standing there, eager to help others, eager to make a difference. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for, everything he had rebuilt after the betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger. It wasn't just about fitness anymore. It was about giving people a platform to rise above their struggles, to find strength, to reconnect with themselves. It was about a community built on mutual support and understanding. Logan took a deep breath and stepped forward to the microphone. The lights dimmed slightly, and the room grew quieter. "When I first started this journey, I didn't know where it would take me," he began, his voice strong and steady. "I had been broken, and I thought that was the end. I thought I'd never be whole again. But I learned something important through all of that. I learned that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about growing stronger because of it." He paused, scanning the room, his eyes landing on several faces he recognized. The people who had walked with him through his journey, people who had trusted him to guide them through their own struggles. And today, Logan continued, "We're not just raising money for a cause. We're raising hope. We're showing that no matter where we come from, no matter how many times we've fallen, we can always get back up. And we can do it together." The applause was deafening, and Logan smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment wash over him. The work wasn't done, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had found his place in the world. This was his purpose, and it wasn't about seeking revenge or forgiveness anymore. It was about building a future, one person at a time. Months passed, and the foundation continued to grow. The events, the workshops, and the outreach programs expanded, and with each success, Logan's sense of purpose deepened. What had started as a small idea had turned into something much bigger, a movement. Through it all, Logan remained grounded. He kept his focus on the people he was helping, the lives he was changing. He wasn't doing this for accolades or recognition. He was doing it because he had found something greater than himself in this work. A way to give back to a world that had once given him nothing but pain. One afternoon, as Logan was finishing up a training session at the gym, he received a phone call. It was from the board of directors for a national organization that focused on veteran support. They had heard about the work Logan was doing through his foundation and wanted to recognize him for his efforts. They were offering him the chance to expand his foundation into a national program to bring the work he had done to a larger audience. Logan took a moment to digest the offer. He had come a long way from the man who had once felt trapped by the betrayal of his past. This was a new challenge, a new opportunity to grow, to make an even bigger impact. But as he stood there, looking out at the gym, at the people who trusted him, Logan made a decision. He wasn't ready to take on something that large just yet. He didn't need national recognition. What mattered most to him was the community he had built, the lives he had touched. He didn't need to be everywhere to make a difference. He just needed to keep doing the work right where he was. With that, Logan politely declined the offer. He wasn't looking to build an empire. He was looking to build lives. In the end, Logan knew that his legacy wasn't about how many people knew his name. It was about the difference he made, the lives he changed, and the future he created for those who needed it most. As he looked around the gym, seeing the familiar faces of his clients, his friends, and the community he had created, Logan realized that he had found the life he had always been searching for. And that, in itself, was the greatest legacy he could leave behind. Logan stood outside the gym, the late afternoon sun casting a golden hue across the city. The air was calm, the quiet hum of the world moving around him. But within, Logan felt a profound sense of peace. He had made it. He had built something real. Not just a gym, not just a foundation, but his life. The journey from betrayal to this moment of clarity had been long and grueling, but now it felt right. He glanced back at the gym's entrance. The door was open, and he could hear the sound of laughter and motivation from the inside. His work was never truly done, but for the first time, Logan didn't mind. This was what he had worked for, a place where people could come and heal, grow, and rebuild together. As he turned to walk back inside, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass door. For the first time, he recognized the man staring back at him. He was whole, he was strong, and he had no regrets. Before stepping through the door, Logan stopped, turned to face the city, and spoke one last time. He wasn't sure if it was to himself, to his community, or to anyone who had been a part of this journey, but the words felt right. This is where it all comes full circle. Not just for me, but for all of us. We all have our battles. Some are harder than others. But the real victory isn't in what we've lost. It's in what we've built. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we're never truly alone in this fight. He smiled, walking back inside with the door clicking shut behind him. And that's the end of Logan's story. From betrayal to healing, from revenge to redemption, it's been a long journey. We hope you've enjoyed following his path and watching him build something bigger than himself. Before you go, I want to hear your thoughts on the story. What part of Logan's journey did you connect with the most? Was it his fight through betrayal, his strength in letting go, or maybe the way he found his purpose after everything? If you've enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Hit that bell icon so you're the first to know when new chapters drop. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. And one more thing, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments below, what did you think of Logan's transformation? Did the story hit home for you? Or did you see yourself in any part of it? Let's start a conversation and share our thoughts. Remember, your story is just as important as Logan's. Everyone has battles, but we all have the strength to rise. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk about it.